SCMP's Women of Our Time 2011 edition. Regina Ip is a first-class honor graduate in English from the University of Hong Kong in 1972. Her passion for learning drove her to study for 3 more master degrees at different stages of her life. Master of Letters in Renaissance Poetry at the University of Glasgow, Sloan Management Program at Stanford University, and more recently, a Master of Art in East Asian Studies at Stanford University. Regina was the first woman to head the Immigration Department in 1996 and became the first female Secretary for Security in 1998 until she resigned in 2003. I still remember Regina when she took her Immigration Department officer's uniform. We were so proud of the first woman in that uniform. On her return from further studies in the United States, Regina established a think tank, Cervantes Policy Institute, in 2006. She was elected member of the Legislative Council in 2008 and was re-elected in 2012. She founded the New People's Party in 2010 and was appointed as non-official member of the Executive Council in 2012. The Honorable Regina Ip will share her stories of leadership and challenges as a woman leader while rising through the ranks. Should we welcome Regina with our usual.
Thank you very much, Fanny, for your kind introduction. Ladies and a few gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. And first of all, a very warm thank you for SCMP for inviting me to speak this afternoon. The topic is women of our time. So I think it's pertinent to begin my remarks by reviewing how have the women of our time been doing in Hong Kong and overseas. I think Hong Kong women have done fairly well. At one time, I think women leaders in Hong Kong were ahead of their counterparts in Asia, in various fields. When Hong Kong was a manufacturing economy, we have had women leading manufacturing companies. Since Hong Kong's transformation into a mostly services-oriented economy, in the private sector, women have excelled in many fields of the service economy. For example, the professions. We have many senior partners in the professions, whether law, accountancy, consultancy, architecture, and so on. In financial services, in corporate management, in the voluntary sector, in health management, and so on. And recently, younger women have managed to break new grounds and have made inroads into operational areas which were hitherto the exclusive preserve of men. For example, I understand that we now have one woman who qualified as a master mariner, and she's working in the Marine Department now. A master mariner is someone who is qualified to command a commercial vessel. Now, we have a first in Hong Kong now. And in the government flying service, we now have 2 women pilots able to fly rotary wing aircraft, that is helicopters, and 1 more pilot in fixed-wing aircraft under training. And I understand that in commercial airlines, the numbers of female pilots are increasing. And the developments in Hong Kong mirror the developments outside Hong Kong, for example, in corporate America. Although in corporate America, women remain the minority, and I'd like to quote from you some figures from recent figures cited by Bloomberg Business Week. Among the companies included in Standard & Poor's 500, there are only 24 CEOs, female CEOs, representing 5% of the CEOs in the Standard & Poor 500 companies. However, we now have in the US CEOs, female CEOs, leading companies well known for their leadership in hard science and technology. For example, we used to think of female CEOs as head of companies like maybe Avon, cosmetics, fashion. But now actually we have female CEOs leading companies like General Motors, IBM, General Dynamics, an aerospace company, and Lockheed Martin. And how did they manage to do that? Because these women, they have been able to master the hard science and technology. And they have been able to do well in operational jobs as they move up their career ladder. And that's why they are where they are today. So in Hong Kong, the same is happening. And coming back to the sports area, which is the subject of some comment recently. The first gold medal was won by a homegrown sportswoman, Li Laishan, back in 1996. She won the first gold medal for Hong Kong in windsurfing. Since then, many outstanding women athletes have followed her footsteps. There are so many names. I'd just like to mention one particularly impressive one, Sarah Li Wai-si, from our own homegrown Kowloon East area, who is a world-class track cyclist and won a bronze medal for Hong Kong in the 2012 London Olympics for track cycling. How about in the government sector? As we were chatting just before the start of my remarks, Hong Kong women seem to do a bit better a decade ago than at present at the political tier in the government. In the cabinet of the first chief executive of Hong Kong, Mr. Tung Chee-hwa, in fact, in his first cabinet, you may recall there were quite a number of women filling the most important positions, including Mrs. Anson Chan serving as Chief Secretary, Ms. Elsie Leung serving as Secretary for Justice, Mrs. Lily Yam serving as Commissioner Against Corruption, and myself first serving as Director of Immigration and then Secretary for Security. Whereas, by contrast, we have only one lady leader in the Hong Kong government now, Mrs. Carrie Lam, the number 2 in our government, who is shouldering a lot of responsibility. Well, I leave it to you to draw your own conclusion as to whether our government might perform better if there were more women. Because of my own vested interest, I will not pass judgment on that question. Now, in politics, Hong Kong have done well, where they have the gumption to come out and meet the challenge. The women who have been elected have all done pretty well in approval ratings or in name recognition, and generally in exerting influence on society. In fact, at least 4 of the political parties in our legislature are headed by women. Liberal Party is headed by Mrs. Selina Chow. The Civic Party is headed by Ms. Audrey Yu. Democratic Party by Ms. Emily Lau. And the youngest of them all, New People's Party, is headed by me. However, the number of women in the legislature remains more or less the same as in previous years. There are 11 women among the 70 members of our legislature. The number has remained more or less the same. Maybe we could discuss later why is it easier for women to serve as civil servants in the public service than to run for elected office. Be that as it may, women have done well in politics in other parts of the world. While I was preparing my remarks, I looked up the number of women in power, in political power around the world, and there are quite a number, apart from German Chancellor Angela Merkel, she is the most powerful woman in Europe, no doubt about that, re-elected with a resounding vote of confidence last year. The President of Brazil, Ms. Rousseff, was recently re-elected. We also have lady leaders in Argentina, Norway, Denmark, and closer to home in the Republic of Korea. So there's nothing to stop women in other parts of the world rising to the top in the world of politics. And if you agree with Aristotle, who observed that the state or the government is the highest form of organization or community because it does the highest good, rising to the top of political power is the highest challenge, in my view, that a woman could face. And it remains to be seen whether a woman could break this glass ceiling in China. Because in the past, as you may know, in China's history, we have had women who were heads of the state, such as Empress Wu of the Tang dynasty, Empress Dowager Cixi of the late Qing dynasty. But these ladies, they rose to power by virtue of their being their matriarchal position in the ruling family, because they were also the head of the family. That's why they became the head of the state, because in Chinese politics, from a long time, the family hierarchy has become closely identified with the political hierarchy. So it remains to be seen whether a woman in China could, rise to the top on her own merits. At this juncture, I would like to talk a bit about the qualities that a woman can bring to politics or governance in general. Again, if I could quote some authorities. According to the ancient Yin and Yang school of Chinese philosophy, which reaches back to pre-Qin, times, that is before 221 BC. The yin and the yang represent two opposing forces in the universe which are in perpetual contest with each other, and in the process generate change and rejuvenation. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, in the West, they don't seem to have this sort of duality, but the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung identified the same duality in every individual's psyche. He asserts that every individual possesses a masculine side, which he calls animus, representing qualities such as heroism, loyalty, and protection. While there is also a feminine side, which he calls anima, which represents love, generosity, and compassion. Generally speaking, women have more anima than animus. I think most of you would agree. And men have more animus than anima. And it is seldom that an individual will have these gender characteristics in equal proportion. So that's the observation of Carl Jung. In recent years, scholars studying leadership have put forward the idea that the feminine style of leadership may be the leadership model which offers hope for the future. A scholar has said, tomorrow's leadership will be a women's world. The gentleman here might disagree. And if I could cite another authority, Harvard Professor Joseph Nye, who was formerly the head of the Kennedy School of Government, in his book, The Powers to Lead, he said so. He quoted other scholars who said so. The masculine leadership style is assertive, competitive, authoritarian, and focused on commanding the behavior of others. The feminine style is collaborative, participatory, integrative, and aimed at co-opting the behavior of others. I personally believe that no one can rely on simply a masculine or a feminine style of leadership to deal with today's complex problems. But in today's flat world, a leader is more likely to find himself or herself at the center of concentric circles rather than at the apex of a hierarchy. You know? In this sort of structure, it may be a leader may be better able to achieve his or her objectives if he or she does so by enticing and attracting others rather than by command and control. You know, if you just look at the situation in Hong Kong right now, you know, you can think for yourself which is easier, you know, to disperse the crowd by force, by command and control, or whether to entice them to do otherwise by representing the values that they want to follow. So these are the questions I want to pose for today's discussions after my brief introductory remarks. What sort of leadership style is best suited for today's world and for Hong Kong's situation? Can women lead? What sort of qualities can women bring to the leadership table? And then can they do better than men? You know? So with these brief remarks, I think I'll just stop there and let you ask questions. Thank you.
This is your opportunity to learn from Regina's experience as a political leader. Questions?
Thank you, Regina. That was very inspiring. I have two questions/comments. The first one is, from my experience in interviewing women leaders in Hong Kong and around Asia, one of the things I have found has been that women leaders have paid a price for their leadership. And that price has been the price of close relationships in their family. And Indra Nooyi actually talks about this and has talked about this publicly. I'd like to hear from you what price you think you might have paid for your leadership, because being a leader requires lots of time, and it means putting other things on the back burner. From Indra Nooyi, we've heard that her relationship with her daughter has really suffered. From the women leaders I interviewed in 2004 and 2005, I've heard that as well. So I'd be really interested to hear what the price that you paid personally. The second question/comment is, if Hong Kong women all participated in voting for our leader, and we were more fairly represented in the election process, that we actually nominated our leader, what do you think would be the difference in the leader we would get if our voices, our needs, our concerns were heard through the ballot? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very interesting questions. You know, the first one is a perennial question faced by all Korean women. In other words, you know, can you have it all? Or can you only do one thing at a time. You know, I'm always full of envy for successful career women who seem to manage to have it all. Margaret Thatcher, for example, a very loyal, devoted husband, plus twins, plus a prime ministership, you know, for many years. You know. But in my case, I could only do one thing at a time. You know, I got married late, you know, by the standards of my time, 31, after an arranged date, you know. In government, I worked so hard that I never had time for dating, social life, you know, minimal social life. I worked such long hours in the bowels of government. You know. And I gave birth to my child, my only child, really, when I was about to, in the twilight years, you know, when I was about to run out of time. You know, so there's a big gap, age gap between myself and my daughter. And I wasn't able to look after her well when she was growing up. For that reason, that was a big part of the reason I decided in 2002, before Article 23 became an issue, to go back to school and to take her to boarding school, because she was not doing well in Hong Kong. And we were both students in the States for 3 years. And during that time, I lived the more normal life of a parent. When she flew to the town where I was living during holidays, I did the usual parenting for her. I drove her around, took her to movies, you know, that sort of thing. And she's now my best of friends. So I think sometimes you need to take a back seat, you know. Sometimes you need to make some choices. What is most important to you at a particular stage of life? There has to be some give and take. And your second question, what would be the outcome if women could play a bigger role in electing the chief executive? Now, the procedure you were thinking about is the nominating committee. The nominating committee comprises 4 sectors, 4 categories, and currently, actually, nominating committee not yet formed. It is to be based on the existing election committee, which has 4 categories and 38 subsectors. The 4 categories are commerce, industry, finance. Cat 2 is the 10 professions. Lawyers, accountants, architects, doctors, all elected individually by the men and women in the professions. And I think there are no lack of women members. Third category is a very mixed bag: social welfare, culture, agriculture, fisheries, labor unions, and trade unions, you know, mostly organizations. The 4th sector is political, people like us, all members of the legislature. 36 Hong Kong deputies to the National People's Congress, about 51 members of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Committee, and about 110 elected district councillors, both men and women. I think there is room for expanding the representation of women on this committee. And my party, New People's Party, we put in the recommendations we put forward in May, we recommended that agriculture and fisheries, they have 60 votes at present. They don't need 60 votes. It could be reduced to make more room for women, young people, students.
I guess my question is, let's put the existing structure aside. If women themselves could go to the ballot tomorrow, just assume we have no politics to worry about at the moment.
No basic law.
No basic law.
Okay.
Actually, that would make life much easier, but let's not worry about that. We all went to the ballot tomorrow. All of us women, all of us men, over the age of 18, and we voted. Women would have a greater voice than they do currently. How do you think that would affect our outcome?
Well, I think the proportion, population-wise, 50-50. I don't have offhand the proportion of elected voters, but I believe in Hong Kong as in US, women, once they register, they have a greater tendency to vote, particularly for a representative of their own gender. You know? For example, in the US 2012 presidential elections, the famous Gallup poll missed by a wide margin because they underweight the voting inclination of the minorities, including women, because the women were very supportive of Obama. So if we didn't have the basic law, and all of you sisters, you know, sisters of Hong Kong were empowered to vote, and if a woman run, I don't know whether you choose on the basis of gender or on the basis of ability. I don't know. I don't really know. Maybe you know better than I do. I hope it's not just gender. I hope it will be ability. Yes, the lady at the back.
Thank you. We're talking about if more women would be able to vote, but anybody who registers, who's a resident here, can vote. So it's up to the women to register, and it's probably also up to the women to stand in their own constituencies, don't you think?
Yes. Or in Hong Kong, irrespective of your nationality, so long as you are a permanent resident, ordinarily resident here for 7 years, you can register as a voter. And how come there remain only 11 women out of 70 legislators? Coming back to your question, the question from the lady earlier about the sacrifice you have to make. Running for an elected office is really a 24/7 job, more so than that of a bureaucrat. And it's not just the amount of time, is you have to be sufficiently thick-skinned, you know, to face the music, you know. Seriously, you know. For example, during the current crisis, because of my support for the police, when I, you know, very often when I step outside Lechco, because of the barricades, the roadblocks, I'm greeted with a lot of calling of names. So you have to be able to accept the limelight and the public bouquet and brickbats, you know. So not everyone is able to take that. You know. The loss of privacy, you know, basically no private life, and you have to make sure there are no skeletons in your cupboard.
Hi, my name is Isabella. I'm from Harvey Nash. I have a question around how you think that we can engage more male representatives to be catalysts for women in politics, and how they can kind of act as, I suppose, mentors, and so we really get the buy-in from not just women, but also the community of men.
That's a very interesting question. I think my first comment is, how do you think men would react to women in leadership positions? In the old colonial days, we had very senior officers who used to say, local male officers in the colonial government, who said that a woman could not be secretary for economic services because the tycoon would not accept her. But Anson proved that she was acceptable. She got on really well with all the tycoons, you know. And then there were people who say a woman could not head up a disciplined service. The men would not accept her. I mean, as many of you might know, I get on very well with my staff, you know, all the men in uniform. In fact, they think that the men in uniform who have worked under me, they probably think that a woman leader is better able to care for them. Because a woman, by definition, because of her role in the family, is a caregiver. You know, where you have greater intersection of knowledge and empathy and compassion. So I'm not sure women have all that much to learn from men, you know. But of course, I learn a lot. I learn a lot from my male leaders in the colonial days, you know. And I'm not really sure today that we necessarily need men to be our mentors.
I suppose what I mean is to really ensure that they act as catalysts, so they help us in order to drive this and to drive change. So the change is not just coming from women and women saying women should be in power. It should also come from the male representatives saying women should be in power, we should all have the same equal opportunities. So that was probably why I was asking with regards to
I get your point. I think I myself benefited from equality of opportunity in education, and then equality of opportunity in the civil service. My bosses treated men and women alike, you know, put the best person in the job, you know. Nowadays, in my party, I like to groom more women for political office, and they do need a bit more support from their bosses, in the sense of allowing them, giving them time, giving them more flexibility, you know, so that they could spend time on the streets, you know, shaking hands with the voters. Men could help that way by being more tolerant of political participation, you know.
Hi, Regina. Well, Silicon Valley has always been a trailblazer in innovation, and the latest one comes in the form of employee benefit, with the freezing of eggs. I'd like to get your perspective on that, please.
Well, my understanding is, although Silicon Valley has female leaders, Yahoo, Facebook, and all that, CEO and COOs, executive pay for women still lag behind that of men in the private sector in the US. In the government, we achieved equal pay and benefits, I think in the 80s. But the Female Senior Government Officers Association, we had to ask for it. We campaigned for it. And our bosses agreed to equal pay and benefits, you know. But for that, do you know what the men did as the price we paid? They decided to publish our date of birth. Seriously. You know, in the old days, that is hidden from the public view. Now, since then, in staff biographies, everything is laid before the public. Women to be treated like men, no more personal secrets. You know? But in the private sector, it's really for the leading women who are fostering change to fight for equal compensation by dint of their ability and their achievements. Have I answered your question?
I know there are more questions. I see a hand there and a hand there. Can we limit it to the last two questions then? Yes. I think Susan, you had the question.
Thank you, Regina. I actually wanted to ask your view about the role of media in today's world. I think we all know that whatever goes on nowadays comes under media limelight, particularly in politics. Filibustering, all the posturing, whatever is put out is for the sake of the media. Under such circumstances, do you think women are advantaged or disadvantaged? I mean, we're said to be more perhaps eloquent, hopefully more presentable, but on the other hand, our confidence in public speaking and so on. So what is your experience? Do you think does this give us an edge, or is that something that is sort of, a threat to women?
I think women definitely advantage in the media-oriented world of politics, because politicians everywhere have to play to the gallery. They have to be able not only to think on their feet, also to talk on their feet, and to give the media the right sound bites and the quotable quotes. I think women have done well. Most, if not all, of the women politicians I meet locally or outside Hong Kong have done really well. And they seem to do better than men in having the common touch, able to communicate with people, do the ordinary things of life, going to the wet market, holding babies and all that, And the media world is also dominated by very capable, eloquent ladies, But of course, women suffer in one respect. Women in public limelight, still a fair amount of gender discrimination, in that men tend to pinpoint how you look, your hairstyle, your hemline, your neckline, and all that, And I have come across many discriminatory remarks, And I have taken my complaints to Anna Wu when she was an Equal Opportunity Commission chairman. We went over all that and decided that there cannot be any legal sanctions. We can only just leave it to, to moral suasion. So the problem remains. Men are rarely subject to comment on their hairstyle or lack of hair, but women continue to be so. So that's something. That's one disadvantage we have to face.
I think that's the last question somewhere back there.
My question is a bit more generalized, but just a comment on the last question that you said you do get comments on your appearance and stuff. I find that it's not just men commenting, it's very often women who are commenting on women. My question was, if you had to list the most important barriers to women rising to leadership positions, what would your listing be? Would it be men? Would it be the work-life balance? Would it be education? How would you list the barriers?
I think the biggest barrier is the enemy within, is in ourselves. Whether we are able to overcome the sort of maybe emotional weakness which could overwhelm us from time to time, lack of family life, lack of social life, gender discrimination, sometimes even hostility in a male-dominated world. To overcome all these uncertainties, moments of weakness and a lapse of confidence, to assert our potential to the full. If we could overcome all this, I think there is nothing to stop a woman from breaking all barriers.
Thank you very much, Regina, for sharing your we have heard from some very successful women leaders. On the other hand, what is the status of gender equality at the workplace in Hong Kong? We need more empirical evidence to guide us. So what prompted SEMP to conduct a survey on upward mobility in Hong Kong, and what are the key objectives? Michael Zhu, Director of Strategic